This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you advertise on LinkedIn, you can build lasting relationships with customers that often translate to high-quality leads, website traffic, and higher brand awareness. For a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit, go to linkedin.com/BeanCast. Terms and conditions apply. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 509, Moving the Dog Dish. For Monday, August 20th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Most every brand out there is finally taking esports seriously, and many are making the leap into the space with various promotions and endorsement deals. But are they employing effective strategies or simply riding a hype wave? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, what to do about nurturing talent in the agency world, what's blocking voice from retail success, whether Facebook inflates its reach, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the super advisor at the Innovation Scout, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, man, I'm excited to be first on the call list tonight.
It almost never happens. It almost never happens, given your placement in the alphabet. But
exactly.
We have a bottom-heavy alphabet tonight. Also with us, we have the Chief Marketing Officer of RPA, Mr. Tim Leake is here. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Bob. I'm happy to be second on the list today. Thank you.
I feel bad for number 3 and number 4. Next up, we have the CEO of agencies Streamlined and Bold Culture, Mr. Darren Martin is here. Hey, Darren.
Hey, Bob. Excited to be back, and I'm happy to be third in line as well. Only this time.
And coming in last place, we're pleased to welcome back the President and Chief Creative Officer at AllScope, as well as board member of Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hi, John. John. What if I called you John?
Like talking now.
And I called you John. What the heck? Nobody's ever called you John. What's this about?
Yeah, what is going on today? You know what? First of all, by the way, everybody listening, Bob got me on the show at the last minute because the other Jonathan canceled. I just want to throw that out there. So this is good. Somebody play the foghorn for me here.
It was the easiest thing to do, you know, so I just went that way.
Except for Jonathan today. All right, fine.
Well, let's jump into the topics. First up, many people, including past guests on the show, have talked effusively about the potential of esports for sponsorship. But as the sponsorship deals attract more mainstream brands, unfortunately, many of those same brands aren't evolving their strategies to best capitalize on the medium. So, Darren, why do so many advertisers remain puzzled about how to build an effective esports strategy? Is it really that hard to figure out what's going on in this space?
I don't think it's that hard. I think research would help them, or marketing agencies would help them. I think that, for me, I'd say that I'm a person who has looked at the research, know the spending projections for esports. Many of the brands that we've worked with, of course, have not talked about it. So I think there's education that needs to be had both on the brand side or their agencies, but also on the esports organization, right? So the levels of sponsorships that they can do, what's the provided value? We look at esports and it's like the target audience is around 21 to 35, mostly men. This is an elusive audience, how are we necessarily connecting to them when they're in this venue? And then how can we connect with them when they're like outside? And so some of that stuff, I think they should look at it as a general campaign. And really, esports is really just experiential, right? We started gaming at home. The
Well,
internet
hold on
allowed
a
us.
second before you go
Yeah.
much further. I mean, it's just like I want to back up and talk about this audience factor that you brought up.
Mhm,
The 20-year-old, the 30-year-old guy who's watching esports.
mhm.
You know, in some ways, that's the problem. We're looking at this as an audience based on age group and desires and video game habits, instead of the fact that each and every single one of these games is different and attracts a different audience with different motivations. And I
Yeah, for
think
sure.
that's the thing that's tripping up most advertisers. We don't understand that this is not buying 30, 40 million people watching esports. This is about what, gathering that 4 million watching this game and the 100,000 watching that game.
Yeah, I think it's what's the value at again for the brand to connect to that specific game itself. And so I think that was going to be one of the points. Integrating the brand with the game itself is actually more valuable, because then you could of course work with the influencers on that specific game, do certain experiential things. It's a larger a sponsorship or a campaign level than just the simple ad buys. But you have to then take again which brand necessarily wants to connect with which game, and or a cluster of games, and then the audiences themselves. I speak of 21 to 35 being a target audience, but my 8-year-old niece watches games on her YouTube channel, and I'm very sure she'd want to go to an event when she, if she could, right? So you're absolutely right. I think that the audience segmentation is so fragmented to the point that people are scared to grab onto esports as a whole.
Yeah, what concerns me about that, and concerns me about the growth of esports as an ad medium, is that because it's so difficult to understand all the different games and to understand what the push points are on every single audience, it becomes another complicated influencer type strategy where you're dealing with lots of micro audiences instead of buying one big audience, which is, I think, where people thought they were going to what they were going to be getting. I mean,
Yeah, but if it works for the brand, it works for the brand. And I think it goes back to what's the value, what specific brand, and what's the value of that, and then how do you extend that value, right? So I think that that's something that the brands on the marketing side and their agencies have to figure out. If it's a great buy, if it's an extension of value for that specific brand, then why not go after it? I think that the research needs to be done, or to your point, some of the esports organizations need to be looking at how can we identify and educate agencies and brands on the types of and levels of sponsorships, and where the audience segments are across different generations, so that we can build value and affinity.
Tim, I want to bring you into this conversation as a salesperson, as the person developing relationships and marketing your agency. You have to have an understanding of what exactly is going to motivate your customers and is going to give them the best possible experience with your product. Is part of the blame of this esports conundrum the fact that esports itself is maybe not doing a strong enough job of selling these ideas to the brands and selling these ideas to the agencies in a way that makes it understandable and understand how to effectively utilize the platform for their strategies?
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of that. The last thing that Darren just said is key. If they don't get out there and explain to the agencies and to marketers what the opportunity is and what the easiest way is to do it, it's actually very hard. Going back to your initial question that you asked, one of the reasons I think we don't get this is because a lot of marketers they don't watch gaming. They don't pay attention to esports. It's just not on a lot of older people's radar.
Or they actually play video games, but they don't watch the sporting events themselves.
Right.
And they overlay that experience with video games and say, oh, this is just marketing the video games. I understand this, and they don't
Right, they
really
oversimplify.
understand the culture.
Yeah. And so I do think, one of it's true across a lot of different social platforms and different, ed tech opportunities. The best ones always find a way to be constantly training their customers and constantly training the agencies or the brands themselves on what the opportunity is and how people are using this platform, because it's almost impossible for any one person to understand how any niche audience uses a niche platform. There's just so many of them now, so it's more complicated, and it's got to be part of the job.
Jonathan, I was just going to go to you next. What are your thoughts on this?
Who are you asking me?
Yeah, I thought it was Jonathan speaking. Did I?
Oh, no, that wasn't me. But you know what? I'll gladly take the baton.
I would gladly ask you. So go ahead.
Hey, let's just refer to me as Fourth. You don't even have to call me Jonathan anymore.
Okay, Mr. Fourth.
Okay, I'm interested to see what you guys think about this, because I still think, at least in my humble experience, I still think there's a misunderstanding of audience. I think as soon as we say, males between 21 and 35, and you're talking about esports or gaming, I think your mind automatically jumps to 30-year-old dude on his parents' couch in the basement, and it's maybe that's just me, but I think if we don't get a better understanding of audience and in the interdependence of the audience with the platform itself, that's how you determine how you're going to market to them. And I just don't think that anybody's digging deep enough into that market to understand it. That's what I think the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most eye-opening experiences I had was when the league that runs Dota 2 had an event here in Manhattan and invited me to go to Madison Square Garden Theater to actually see a live event. I had no idea what to expect, and it was unbelievable how rapt the attention and how tense the room was and how people cheered at the right moments. And I had no idea what was going on screen, but the game itself translated into a sporting event as big as and exciting as any kind of baseball game I've ever been to.
Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. Have you guys, just out of curiosity, have you guys ever been to a NASCAR event?
No, that's the epitome of excitement, though. When
I gotta tell you, man, I've only been to one race in my entire life, and that was when I lived in Richmond, Virginia. And I gotta tell you, they give you this handheld device, and you can choose the cockpit of any driver you want at any given time and get their point of view. So, I mean, they've got the parking. Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting. I mean, the crowd watching was more fun than watching the race, to be honest with you. But they've got. I mean, shirts are optional. That's great. Mullets are required. And it was a lot of fun. What ends up happening is you've got interactivity between device, car, race, and sponsors. So they've got that parking lot down, man. They're there to sell you stuff. They've got it down. Everybody else, like I said, know your market.
What I see as being a huge opportunity for esports, Joe, is not what most advertisers seem to be embracing. Like when I look at what the opportunities for esports are, I mean, something like what Jonathan said is much more in line with the audience than doing an influencer campaign or a sponsorship or an endorsement deal with one of the game stars. And I think that, we have this expectation that when we're working within the esports realm, that somehow we can apply all our sporting metaphors and all our sporting tactics that we've used for years and make them work in this same venue. And I'm wondering, will the audience, will the league gain enough momentum so at some point that kind of strategy will be effective? Or is it always going to be kind of a malaise of trying to figure out what each audience wants to have, what each audience wants to embrace, and to basically, create some kind of energy around it?
Dude, that was the longest intro ever. I don't even know what the question was. Yes. No.
To answer your question, yes, and 7.
No, listen, I'm just teasing with you, Bob, because I don't like being fourth either.
Hey, I'm in last place here, buddy.
So I find this whole topic kind of humorous, because any advertiser even debating the efficacy or the potential of esports is clearly not focused and have their eyes on the prize. I mean, this and I don't want to call it a medium, because the worst thing we could do is start talking about it in our stupid little grubby advertising terms and try and figure out how to create pop-ups and interstitials and Coke cans, and it's just I mean, we've seen this time and time again with even previous iterations of gaming or virtual worlds or whatever the case may be. If we really are focused on audience, then instead of just looking at reach and numbers, we should be looking at time spent and engagement. And at the end of the day, this is one of the fastest growing, it's a cultural phenomena. I was doing a little bit of extra research on the topic, and my boys are all over Fortnite, and they now have this thing called Friday. I think they call it Friday Fortnite or Fortnite Fridays, that are getting more unique streams or more unique audience than The Walking Dead. So the audience is there, the reach is there. The question comes down to being able to be creative and actually doing a little bit of work instead of expecting this to fall, on their laps like a silver platter. And I mean, I'm aware of, and I only know this through my boys, but I'll just give you two examples of how this is kind of already mainstreaming, if you will. So for the Avengers movie, there was this brilliant tie-in. Now, I don't know how much of it was paid or not paid, with where Thanos's glove was in every single game, and it was just randomly hidden, or it was in a chest, or it was, you had to kind of dig it up. And once you put the glove on, you became Thanos. So you became almost super or uber powerful and had a little bit of an unfair advantage. What a brilliant tie-in, to a movie that quite frankly did very well. And then there are other
And
little
it
things.
did two things that a lot of sponsors miss out on when they're trying to work within the esports realm. I mean, it gave you an opportunity to play with the ad in an interesting way, play with the promotion in a way that mattered, and you put it as part of the actual content. I mean, those two factors made for a fantastic ad that probably generated a lot of interest in the movie that was probably already latent to begin with. And I think that's a really smart strategy.
I don't want us to call it ads or advertising, because I think it's
Well,
kind
call
of
it an
evolved.
ad-like object. I mean, that's what Colin Glom always calls it. I mean, it's just like ad-like objects, or the new way to reach a consumer. It's not an advertisement, but it acts
Right,
like an ad.
right. And one of the things also in I don't know if it was one of the source articles or just one of the ones that I picked up, there are certain industries and brands that clearly are endemic to esports and gaming in general. And then there are those that just have to actually use their brains and do a little bit of thinking and actually kind of do some real work to be able to kind of make that connection or establish that connection. And I think probably where the gap or the lag is coming from are these mainstream brands that are kind of, sitting on the sidelines waiting for somebody else to make the first move.
Yeah,
But
but
the
if
danger
they
is being left behind.
Yeah, but if they don't know, also, I don't want to put it the total blame, of course, on the brands, the agencies. If they don't know, if the esports organizations aren't showing this value, this valuable audience, one, the reach is a second thing. The idea that it's a valuable audience who's watching, who's engaging, is definitely the first thing. If they don't know about it, then they need to be educated. So on the esports organization side, if they want to get to that 1.5 billion or more in 2020, they have to start ingesting themselves where the other brands are who are not compete or who are not advertised or working with them with an experience or an ad-like object, right? They need to be at certain events or be like the ad weeks or things. Maybe I love it if they invited certain people, or maybe even thrown through a smaller gaming or experience so people can see it within the industry. So while the brands and the agencies need to get smarter and they need to open up their eyes and see what's going on in the real world, and I know we talk about that a lot, the organizations and their salespeople, their marketing teams need to do better at the unique ways and creative ways in which they reach those brands who are not with them.
I'll just say, I remember a reporter contacting us from a pretty mainstream let's say, newspaper slash magazine. And this is when I was running Crayon, and it was all about Second Life, the whole virtual world of Second Life. And we sat down, we had a whole long conversation, and then they asked me, would I mind giving them a demonstration of Second Life? I said, what do you mean a demonstration? They said, well, I've heard so much about it, but I haven't actually gone into Second Life. And I think, at the end of the day, whether, agencies or brands, if they're not actually rolling up their sleeves and immersing themselves, and I think you were alluding to it, but ultimately the onus is not on the esports or the gaming industry. The onus is on the brands and their agencies to figure it out, and not expect, the sellers to ingratiate themselves. Because I think it's different this time. I really do.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely saying it's a shared interest on both sides. Agencies need to do it just because it's their job. So I totally agree with that.
Well, I want to move on and talk a little bit about agencies and about the talent nurturing problem that goes on in Adland. But before we do that, I want to talk about our sponsor, LinkedIn, and give you guys out there in the audience an opportunity to get $100 ad credit. Now, this is not a typical offer from them. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to try out their service. And I want you to listen to the ad so that you can find out a little bit more about how to take care of it. Look, when we talk about LinkedIn, you have to admit LinkedIn has become one of the most important parts of your day. I don't know about you, but I check LinkedIn on a consistent basis, both from a career standpoint and from a business standpoint. It's a great opportunity to reach the consumers, reach the customers, reach the business owners that I want to touch base with. And that's the cool thing about LinkedIn. When you have to get to an audience that you want to target them where they're engaging every single day and when they're ready to make a decision. And LinkedIn is the perfect place to do it. Look, when you advertise on LinkedIn, which is hands down the world's largest professional network, you have the opportunity to build the kind of long-lasting relationships with your customers that actually translate into high-quality leads, website traffic, and higher brand awareness. And then all it takes is getting to the right audience when you're trying to do these things. I mean, every day on LinkedIn, over 500 million professionals engage with the content that's provided there by people just like you. And chances are your future customers are among these 500 million professionals. They're out there, they're reading the content, they're engaging with businesses, they want to hear from you, and this is a great opportunity for you to reach out to them. LinkedIn even makes it easy to target down to the title of the job that you're trying to reach, the company name, the industry you're trying to reach. That's because they have the marketing tools that help you target your customers with the kind of precision that you need in order to become effective. Because better targeting equals a message to your customer that they're going to care about, which in turn leads to more trust built with these same customers. So you want to reach out to people via LinkedIn because they are actively using this platform on a regular basis, and you're targeting them with the message that they need to hear about in a forum that they're actually caring about. And the most important thing to remember is that 4 out of 5 customers who are on LinkedIn are decision makers. Let's say that again. 4 out of 5 customers who are on LinkedIn are decision makers at their companies. So when you're building relationships on LinkedIn, you're building relationships that really matter. Now, I told you that you're going to get a $100 LinkedIn ad credit, and I want you to take advantage of it right now. To redeem a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit and launch your first campaign, I want you to go to linkedin.com/BeanCast. That address again is linkedin.com/BeanCast for your free $100 ad credit. Terms and conditions apply. Give it a try and see for yourself what LinkedIn does for you. And we thank them very much for their support of the BeanCast. Well, moving on, I read an interesting article on the Drum this past week that contrasted talent management in tech firms with talent management in agencies. Now, in this article, it outlined how the differences were quite a few, but perhaps the most striking dichotomy for me was that while tech firms often encourage development of skills and knowledge outside of a job skill set, Agencies hire, they promote, and they fire based not on potential skills, but rather performance of the narrowly defined tasks of the job itself. So, Joe, there's a case to be made for each of these approaches, but is one better for business? What's your take on this kind of juxtaposition of the two different methodologies, and which do you feel is better?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just busy redeeming my $100 LinkedIn credit. No,
Thank
literally,
you.
I just redeemed it, and I'm sending you a screenshot in a few minutes. Good one, Bob. Very proud of you. That was it. That was awesome. What was the question again? No. So, okay. So when I don't know if I've ever like shared this little anecdote. It's a tiny little anecdote, but when I came to this country 21 years ago, I worked I got a job at Ogilvy as an AE. And, you know, one of the things that just struck me was everyone's name was on a beautiful, you know, kind of durable plastic square, because, you know, it was the whole branding, Ogilvy red and so on and so forth, red square. My name, Joseph Jaffe, in white, but it was on a magnet, you know, and so you just put it onto the door or wherever your cube was, and if you got, I suppose, fired or let go, they would just take the magnet off and put another magnet on. And I guess, you know, there was some practical usage, which is if you moved offices, you got a promotion, they just move your name magnet and move it around. But it just struck me, and it wasn't obviously just endemic to Ogilvy, it's every single company, how transient their approach to talent is. And I'm pretty sure every single person's company on this call or even listening, it's exactly the case. You don't see something that looks like a permanent investment in that piece of talent, which is we'll etch your name into the door and we'll have to like get a new door if you leave or something like that. And so I think now on the flip side, and I will never forget this, at Ogilvy, we went through this AETP, Account Executive Training Program. It was the most incredible training program. I looked forward to it every single week. I learned so much about presentation skills, about research, about everything. That, you know, that training program is no more at Ogilvy and probably hasn't been there for 10 or 15 years. And again, this is not against Ogilvy in any way, it's just a personal anecdote. The fact is the investment in talent is so marginal within the agency business today, and who can blame them based on whatever the margins are coming from clients. Now, now contrast that with Google, for example. Google instituted this 60, 30, 10 approach, or this 10% approach specifically to the engineers, where 10% of their time should be spent, has to be spent on things that have absolutely nothing to do with their job. Nothing to do with their job. Whether it's skydiving, it doesn't matter. Cooking, the whole idea is to continue to, you know, build their diversity and their skill set with sometimes even lateral tasks that can allow them to be more and better rounded. And then again, and the final exhibit, I suppose, is if you look at the startup world, it is all about collaboration. It's all about combining different skill sets, as opposed to saying you're in the traffic department, you're in the production department, you're a creative, you're in client service. So until we see innovation and until we see some kind of tearing down of these walls and silos within the agency business, and of course that's the context of this topic, how on earth are agencies going to be able to attract and retain the best and the brightest and be able to compete with the likes of the Googles? It's just not going to be possible.
Darren, you're an agency leader. You're dealing with this issue with talent management. I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, is it smart to give your employees a lot of opportunity and leeway to learn and grow and maybe get some personal joy out of their own endeavors as opposed to actually focusing on work time, which seems like a...
Yeah, absolutely. On the streamline side, I think it's a necessity. We're working with one, where we are in our current juncture, contractors, right? So it's very fun to be able to work with people in LA and Georgia and in Florida, in different parts of the US and world, right? And so they're doing things innately. On the bold culture side, when we go to agencies and they're looking for us to how they can hire and retain diverse talent, is exactly what Joe was saying. It's why agencies are having a problem connecting to niche and diverse audiences, right? Um, they don't have an understanding of culture. It's very just like, get the job done. Here's the client. Here's what we need to do. And because things are running, and we experience on the streamline side, right? So it's great to see this in both ways. You're running to get client deliverables. The margins aren't as high. Talent attrition is high, right? And so you don't have this space where talent is being nurtured, or you have time to do the classes. But it's so important, and it's so important for people to step outside of what they're doing and to follow what's going on in the world. It goes back to our last conversation on esports, right? People aren't able to experience that because in the agency world, they're heads down trying to get this thing
Right.
out, and they're not, and they can't be creative, right? So they need to be able to build and learn and understand so that they can connect to the audiences who they are trying to talk to.
And Darren, I mean, can you imagine in these agency environments where you might have a younger employee, maybe even someone who's actually into esports and
Mhm.
gaming, that goes to their agency and says, "Can I go to this event?"
Right.
And they're basically saying, "Look, if you want to go to the event, you're going to have to take leave and or pay your own way there." And
Mhm.
that's exactly the kinds of places they should be going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so they're not supporting their talent. And so that's why the talent leave, they get the expertise, and then they leave and they start their own agency. Possibly if they're interested in esports, they start their esports agency, and they go after the big dollars. They become competitors, right? So agencies have to start training their talent and understand that people have to learn, and that especially with digital changing and so many people putting their dollars in digital, we all have to learn. This thing is changing every day. Facebook, Twitter, Google itself is changing. So if they are, we need to put our understanding in, where the culture and where the world is going.
Well,
And
let me play devil's advocate on this for a minute, because while my heart is with you guys in terms of how you should manage your talent and how you should give them the opportunities to expand their horizons, I still have to admit that you have a couple big players that are doing this and have been very successful. You also have a couple big players like, say, Amazon, that don't encourage this type of behavior, and they're doing just fine. And you've got a lot of young startup companies that want to be hip and millennial and do these types of things, but they're not turning a profit. So is it really the best way to go about your business to encourage employees to basically goof off? I don't want to characterize it, but just encouraging them to goof off. Is that the best way to get the most value out of your employee and get the job actually completed?
in my opinion, no. I mean, in my opinion, you need to do a mix of both, right? You want to, of course, be productive, but if you look at Amazon and the reports of where their talent, right, and them feeling overwhelmed, and the certain, health and different factors that have went into Amazon, and we've read about over the years around their productivity. Sure, they could be productive and they could have warehouses of people working, but those people are tired, they're uninspired, and that's also something that's more of a systematic job, right?
Yeah, it's
In
a crappy
itself,
job. It's
you're
a
looking at
crappy job.
agencies.
It's a
Yeah, but
crappy job, and it's just like, it's terrible. And I'm not trying to suggest that it's a good approach. I agree with you, but at the same time, they are incredibly successful. Second most profitable or
yeah,
second most valuable company in the world right now.
but if you're an agency, your job is to speak to the culture and speak to what people are doing in order for them to buy Amazon's product, right? Or someone else's for their brand's product. And so the game has to be different. We're talking about people trying to connect and talk to people. And if I'm tired, I'm uninspired, then I'm not going to give you my best work, and I'm not going to be able to connect with you in a way in the campaigns that I run or that I try to gain for my agency, because I'm uninspired. So I need to be on the ground. And I think the agencies don't do enough of that. And that's why we have problems with things like Pepsi, things like esports, things like everything else that they mess up on, is because they are so busy in their own minds, too many different factors, that they cannot step out there. So they
And
need
there's
to.
and there's a key word that you just said, which is so critical, and it really is a common thread across the first two themes, which is the word culture. because when you look today, and we're picking on the agencies tonight, so let's just talk about the brands out there. you know I often say to them, wearing jeans and having standing desks does not make you into a startup. They all think that they're so entrepreneurial because they've got standing desks or something, or they put in a ping pong table and bean bags, and now they think they're cool and hip, and they're not, because it's not authentic and it's not consistent with their culture. Their culture is horribly flawed, and and struggling to adapt, and struggling to kind of connect with this changing workforce. And so the bottom, it so isn't about goofing off. If it is, well, I mean, it would be if it isn't authentic, and it just becomes, throwing this almost as candy or eye candy in a sense. And so I think really what this is forcing us to do is to look at the look at the culture of these companies and figure out, how do we create something that feels authentic and consistent and can endure, as opposed to being this kind of flash in the pan.
Can I
Yeah, jump in.
speak on behalf of agencies for a second, because I think we're painting with a really broad brush when we say that agencies don't make this investment, and we pivoted a little bit from training to, let people goof off on the company dime. And I don't think most agencies, I think Darren said this earlier, we don't really have the margins to always justify that. But if it's the right thing and it's right for what that person does, I know lots of agencies that support that sort of thing and that invest in that.
Okay, but to clarify, I mean, that's what the article was saying, that it's just like what you're basically claiming is that your agency decides, yes, this is something that could potentially benefit you. You've made a case for how it could benefit this job function. You're allowed to do it. Whereas the tech companies that are embracing a more open strategy are just saying, whatever you want to do, let's find out what kind of value it comes back with. You know what I mean? Sure. Which is a much more exploratory way to go about it, because you don't always know how something's going to benefit you. I mean, I wouldn't have known how my understanding of esports would have been so broadened just by going to this stupid event that I was conned into going to by a PR flack, but I did. And I was really had my eyes open to the potential of esports, and I could have never made a case for that. And
I think the best people out there are always going to find ways to apply interesting things. And I think, the best agencies out there are going to find ways to give people that space to be able to explore that. It's hard without speaking about specifics, because going and experiencing an esports event is different than, say, taking a 2-month trip around the world, or I don't know, taking time to rebuild a hot rod or something. So, the specifics matter in terms of what that is and where it might be able to come back. And I'm a big believer in sort of like, the 70-20-10 and being able to do whatever you want with that 10 and being able to explore it. And it's not as simple as being able to say, oh, well, agencies just don't invest in that. I mean, there are very few companies that are on the scale of a Google or an Amazon or something that have those kind of margins and that kind of profit, that they can spend so much money investing in those things. And I don't want to come across being overly conservative about the approach, because there's a lot that certainly we at my agency and at a lot of other agencies that I know about invest in to be able to bring training to our employees and to be able to create these kind of opportunities. And I think it's not always fair to compare what Google is doing, say, to what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
And your by the way, on the BeanCast, we like to paint with broad brushes, and so it's great. Do. It's great to have perspective.
In fact, when you look at the logo, it's not a ponytail coming off that top bean; it's a brush. So there you go.
But I just wanted to add one point, which is, look, I think everything that you're saying is a good perspective and something that needs to be put on the table. I think the challenge to compare the agencies to Google is, we didn't do it. I mean, it was, okay, so he's moved on, but it was Martin Sorrell coming out with this kind of, I don't know if it was a rant or he was just kind of whining or whatever it was, but he was complaining that WPP's lunch was being stolen on two sides, right? On one side, all the consultancies, the Deloittes and the PwCs and Accentures of the world, and on the other side, the Googles and Facebook. So it's a real problem, and it's there, and if it's happening at that level, you can be sure it's happening multiple levels below. So I think that's kind of the challenge.
It is. I mean, we will always have that challenge. I mean, if the advertising industry cannot pay what the consultancies pay and cannot pay what Google pays, it cannot offer those same things, because fundamentally, Google makes more money and consultancies make more money. They both have higher profit margins. That's a problem. And I think that, then we change topics and we start to go about the whole compensation issue within agencies. But as long as then clients are continuing to squeeze the profit margins on behalf of agencies, that's going to continue to be a problem, which means they don't get the best talent. So yes, it's something we have to deal with, but there's no easy answer to it. If somebody has more money to spend, you'll always lose to them.
And I'd like to add just on that, if there's not a lot of money to spend, and we talk about experiences and having the ability for talent to go out into the world, it's bringing the world into the agency, in my opinion. It's what we tell agencies at Bold Culture, right? It's so working with cultural organizations who are already doing work and then having them come into the agency, I think it's an experience that people would then use that as a compensation method, right? So how can the talent learn both on a skill level in different departments of the agency so they can be more valuable for their bosses or their company, but then also how can the company and the executives bring culture into the agency so that if you don't have time to go out, then we can bring it to you. And I think
in
that's
fairness,
definitely it.
I don't think any agency out there is throwing up their hands and going, well, we're just not going to be able to make it work. I think actually we're using our secret weapon, which is creativity, and coming up with really interesting things to do to be able to make our cultures attractive and to make what we're doing attractive. And I think we get our fair share of talent, and sometimes we train them and they're awesome, and then Google goes and hires them. That's a great compliment to our talent.
Well, I got to move on to the next topic. This was fascinating, this conversation, but we have to move on. More questioning of the potential of voice marketing this week, as Adweek wonders in depth whether voice is ready for retail. While people love their voice-activated devices for things like tasks, shopping still accounts for a tiny, tiny fraction of the activity. Jonathan, are players like Amazon, Amazon comes up again, are players like Amazon doing something wrong, or is the activity still too new to be gaining significant traction? What's going on with the kind of latency in terms of adopting voice as a searching mechanism? It's still searching, shopping mechanism, not a searching mechanism, but go for it.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I want to just quickly, that last question that we were on with these agencies, with the training and such, I got to tell you, I mean, it's everything is about personal initiative. Okay. So I think when you apply that to shopping and when you apply that to voice command, I think what's happening is people don't want to dip their toe in the water and they're waiting for somebody else to go first. That's what I've seen firsthand. I have to tell you that it is one of the next frontiers out there. I believe voice is going to overtake everything. It is going to. It's just, the problem is, I
don't believe that anymore. I mean, I've been an early adopter in terms of understanding voice and covering voice, and I've been, really espousing the importance of it since I first learned about Siri way back in the day, when Siri was just a new product, even before it was, bought by Apple. Yet the reality is, yes, it's an important part of the puzzle of how we're going to interact with our devices, but by no means is it the only way we're going to interact with our devices, and it's certainly not going to be the primary way that we interact with all our devices going forward.
You know what though, Bob? I think, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree only in that I do believe that the keyboard is going to become obsolete. I really think so. I think now whether that applies to online shopping, whether it applies to, image search, whether that applies to social, whatever, people want to hear their own voice. And frankly, right now, people want to see their own text messages and selfies. I think people are going to want to hear their own voice more so. And besides that, it's not only going to track vernacular and terminology, it's going to also detect tone and tonality. And I think, to me, I think that I said it before, I think that's the frontier, because what happens is when you can eliminate the keyboard, things are going to come faster, better, smarter, and more reactive to the way that you're searching for them. And I think voice is the way to go. That's my opinion.
But Jonathan, the interesting thing is what we're missing, or what we still need, I think, is the monitor. And a lot of times, when we think about voice assistants, they've done away with the monitor. And when it comes to shopping, it's easy to use voice as an interface, right? To use it instead of a keyboard, to use it to talk to. It's much simpler.
Absolutely.
But it's very difficult to know what's happening on the other side without the feedback loop of the monitor or of a screen. And so I think, and you can see Amazon starting to build screens into a lot of their Alexa-powered devices now. I think we're going to see that start to creep back in, because it will be much easier to shop if I can say, I shouldn't say her name out loud, or else
yeah, Siri.
it's starting to go. My Amazon Echo device name, if you say her name and ask about shopping, if it could pop up, say, 5 shoes that I have to choose from, or the different sizes of Illy brand coffee that I might have asked about. Because there's so much uncertainty on the other end when it comes to shopping specifically. You really want to make sure that you got it right. Unless you're just reordering something you order over and over again, simply interfacing with voice and then just hearing it back isn't enough.
No, listen, I think you're absolutely dead on. I think, because look, when it comes to the shopping experience, it's a visual experience, and it's funny because online shopping period is taken off so much. And I remember seeing years ago the predictions that online shopping wasn't going to do it because that touchy-feely isn't a part of the equation if you're doing it online. Well, tell that to Amazon, right? And I do think you're right. I think the visual component mixed in with the audio command, I think that's the way to go.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's the core of my point here. It's just like, yes, we'll interact with our devices, we'll interact in the shopping experience with voice, but we're kind of like groping in the dark when we're using these voice devices as they exist today.
Voice in isolation is, that's if a tree falls in the woods, right? It's the same thing. I mean, if we don't utilize it as a component to it, because like I said, I'm not going to buy that sweater unless I see it, right? But if I could do a voice search for it while I'm doing the dishes or something, it allows that multitasking. That multitasking allows for you to do more shopping, more voice command, more products. I mean, you're going to get a better opportunity. But again, if I can't see it, I can't buy it, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Anything the other panelists want to add here before I move on? Darren, anything that you want to add to this conversation about voice?
Nope, I think you all knocked it out the park. I do not use Alexa. I actually had...
Whoops, he said it.
Yeah, well, I said it because I don't have it here.
He doesn't use it, so it works.
In fact, because we don't care about you people with Alexa, we'll just say Alexa over and over again.
Way to go, Darren.
No, because I need to see what I'm buying, right? I haven't adopted that experience yet. I know many people haven't. It's a large thing, but for me, it's just like, I need to know what I'm buying, and I need to know the quantity, and then it may be much easier for me to just go on Amazon and just go and just re-buy that.
That's the whole thing. That's the core of my problem. Think back to the shopping behavior. When you're in a store or when you're on a website, large degrees of that shopping go on without any verbal communication. It's all about touch or sight or smell or whatever other sense you want to engage, but it's not you actually using your voice in that process. And I think that's why voice has been so slow to ramp up on the e-com side of things. It's not engaging people in a way that the typical website has done to replace the in-store experience, which is a very visual
that's
browsing
true.
experience.
That's true, Bob. But I got to tell you, first of all, I don't like your attitude. Okay? And look at
Poor Bob.
I'm still bitter for being Forrest. You're absolutely right. But I just have to say this. You guys know that for years now I've consulted annually with YouTube, right? The thing about YouTube is they're trying to get you to increase your session time. Okay. And that's been their biggest challenge over the years because they trained us to come in and look for something and then get out. And that's the same thing with voice or whatever, because it's winner by design and not by default. So the voice and utilization of voice and things like that, you got to move we always used to say you move the dog dish an inch at a time until the dog eats on the rug. Well, it's the same thing. Somebody's got to take the right first steps to get you to get that ingrained to you. Online shopping, it's been around long enough now. But the thing is that if somebody's not going to start to move the dog dish, nobody's going to eat on the rug. How about that?
The dog dish. That I love that metaphor, and it's probably the name of the show.
I win again.
So I just want to say from a accessibility standpoint, just really quickly, accessibility standpoint, voice does allow many older generations, people who may have disabilities, I think, to use, their voice in different ways, to purchase, to use, to navigate news and sports. I think that it's definitely a large value. I think once you integrate the screens and everything else, it just becomes a better experience for me.
So I was just going to add that if anything, I think the industry has done too much to hype voice as opposed to too little. I mean, it's definitely we're still, it's early days, and if you use the diffusion of innovations kind of methodology, we're still at the innovator stage and maybe a little bit of the early adopters. So we're still at the 3 or 4% of the entire market, and that's okay. That's fine. We just need more use cases and more natural places where it's going to just make sense. And for example, I don't think it's a leap of faith at all to look at, as opposed to the Samsung refrigerator from 3 or 4 years ago that was clearly way too early in the game. There's going to come a time sooner rather than later where you will be able to open up your refrigerator. You will be able to see that you're low on milk, not because it tells you that, because you have a brain and you have eyes and you have hands, and you'll pick it up and go, oh crap, we've run out of milk. And that's a natural place to be able to hit a button, or just to be able to say, I won't do it so that everyone's, things go off, but, get me some more, maybe not milk, or put this on my list, or whatever the case may be. And that's when you'll start to see kind of little ramp ups, when we can actually embed voice technology as it relates to commerce at these natural points when it just makes sense to be able to buy something.
Yeah, and that'll start the movement in the right direction. Well, moving on to the final topic, a Kansas aromatherapy store owner, boy, that's a mouthful, is suing Facebook over allegedly inflating their audience numbers when targeting ads. Look, I don't doubt that there's something behind the scenes and there's all kinds of weirdness going on, Tim, but how likely is it that Facebook is boldly and baldly inflating audience reach here?
Well, I think it's maybe a little bit dangerous to pick on Facebook in an episode sponsored by LinkedIn, so we'll tread lightly. But I mean,
$100 card. Come on, $100 of ad credit.
I mean, they're Facebook. It's an amazingly effective platform for advertisers. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn and of Facebook. And so I don't get why they would fudge this on purpose. I think the challenge really just has to do with they need a good explanation, because as I read the article, and this is sort of a build on something that seemed to pop last September, where basically people in general realized that whatever the potential reach that Facebook says, it tends to be significantly higher than the census data of the total population, which is hard to swallow, right? So, if this woman found the census data says that there's 800,000 residents in Chicago in the 18 to 34 demo, Facebook says they can reach 1.9 million. Well, they have to be able to explain that because, it's common sense just to say that doesn't sound right. And when common sense goes off, our spider sense starts going, this sounds fishy. This is weird. Why am I being lied to? And data can be fuzzier than we wish it was. It's it's just how it is. So they just have to explain it.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time somebody inflated their traffic either, And besides that, maybe they're counting eyeballs, not people.
Oh, well, that would do it. The math works.
There you go. There's your answer.
Oh man. Well, I mean, it's just like I see that, but I still don't see I can't necessarily get behind this idea that it's intentional inflation. Like,
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think that it's just like it's stupidity or it's, double
Fake
counting of
accounts.
numbers or fake accounts or something else is in the mix that's causing a problem and it needs to be fixed. And thank God we're pointing this out now. And Facebook is hopefully going to try to do something about this. But to say that they're actively trying to inflate numbers in such a bold way, it seems highly unlikely. But I mean, I've heard weirder things happen.
And of all the people who don't have to do it, I think Facebook's near the top. They've got pretty good traffic.
Well, with that, it's time for the AdFail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Joe Jaffe. You can find him at theinnovationscout.com. That's where he is the super advisor. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote this week?
So I heard there's this new festival in Austin called South by Southwest. And,
I heard that.
I'm very excited about it.
Panel picker time.
Yeah, exactly. You know it. I'm back. I'm back, and I'm shilling shamelessly my book reading. So this is for my 5th book, and the panel is called. It's a book reading. It's called "Built to Suck: The Demise of the Corporation," and I would love it if you would vote me up. Fill me up, do whatever the hell you need to do. This is the end of the show, Bob, so we can get a little bit risque. But your votes would hopefully tip me over the edge, and I look forward to being able to share my new book with you guys in March.
So many double entendres in that. So many.
I know.
Push
I've
you
been
over the
drinking
edge.
for the last hour on the show. So,
Well, next up we have Tim Leake. You can find him at RPA. It's RPA.com, right, Tim?
That's right.
So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Well, now I should have promoted RPA's 4 different South by talks, but I didn't have that one ready to go. I actually didn't think I had anything particular to plug. So what I wanted to plug, honestly, is a bit of a, an industry PSA to hire people with experience. I've talked with, probably like 8 different people over the last couple of months that are people that with a lot of experience, are really great at what they do, and they're not getting the amount of work that they want to get because people are constantly hiring younger, cheaper people. When in fact, it's certainly been my experience that people with experience that know what they're doing are able to solve problems significantly faster and with higher quality. And it just strikes me as obviously we know there's an age issue in the industry, but that's my shameless plug. Hire people with experience.
Hear, 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 hear. Next up, we have Darren Martin. You can find him at Streamlined Media. That's streamlinemedia.co. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Yes, it is, Bob. Thanks for that. And I'd like to just plug Bold Culture, our multicultural communication agency. We help brands and agencies connect to and retain diverse talent. We actually also have a South by Southwest panel picker that I want to plug. And we're actually talking about that mass exodus of diverse talent in the tech industry. Of course, we're seeing large attrition rates from Black and Latinx individuals, as well as women in larger companies like Facebook and Google. And so we're going to talk about tech not necessarily engaging or working with their diverse talent to keep them in their reign. So definitely I'll send the link through to Bob, and you can also vote at boldculture.co. We'll have a link there as well.
Fantastic. Well, we've got two panel pickers. Jonathan, you got a panel picker? Jonathan
No,
Sacchi.
I don't have one today.
Jonathan Sacchi. You can find him at mashburnenterprises.com, allscope.com, a whole bunch of websites. But tell us what's going on, Jonathan. What would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of you, Bob, and I'm a big fan of the show. So I would hope that everybody would share the show. I'm also a huge fan of LinkedIn. Very happy. I hit over 12,000 links last week, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I would also say I would like to promote the other panelists on here. So I think this is one of the smartest groups of people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So I would promote each of you guys, and I would hope that the audience would help promote their South by Southwest.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody out there want to vote up a good panel? These are two excellent choices. Known Joe for years, just met Darren recently, but love you and love your thoughts, man. You're pretty amazing. So definitely check out both those panels. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, we now have transcription services available for every episode, thanks to transcribeme.com. Go to transcribeme.com/BeanCast. They're going to give you a special offer, a nice discount for your first order. So check them out at transcribeme.com/BeanCast. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Twitter continues to bite the hand that feeds, Joe, ending API access to critical functions, including push notifications and even Apple Watch usage. It'd be one thing if they had a competing product for these services, but they don't even have a competing product for these services. They just want to charge a whole heck of a lot of money to make it impossibly expensive for consumers to actually buy these apps anymore.
No, but give them a break, because they've still got promoted accounts and promoted tweets. So I'm pretty sure between those promoted products, they're gonna be okay. Well, that and their little relationship with the president. But other than that, they're gonna be okay.
Yeah, there's that. How about that?
Now, next up, a group of Google employees have outed the search giant for working with the Chinese government, Darren, to put out a censored version of their search product. It's funny, this kind of weird relationship that Google has always had with China. They've always been looking for ways in which to bring their product there. And they claimed that it was all about trying to keep the product free and clear and open for the Chinese user, but it doesn't seem like they were following with their own, approaches, were they?
Oh yeah, for sure. Google is chasing money. The Chinese government has money, and so if they need to find a way in which to build a product around their policies, they're going to do that. Right. And they're going to try to find a way to increase their revenue on an ethics level. We can argue about that. I think that but they're trying to find out how to increase their profit. And
yeah, and you know what, though? It still might be a step in the right direction, right? At least it's something, right?
Yeah, but I think that, I think there are things now, right? But at least it's something is totally true. But if it's regulated, then that's dangerous as well. Very dangerous.
Well, something we can all get behind is definitely dangerous. Everyone this past week has been lauding the Bud Light Cleveland Browns promotion that put chained refrigerators of the product all over the NFL team's stadium to be opened and distributed for free only if the team finally wins. Jonathan, the only trouble is the math. Look, we've got enough beer in these refrigerators to account for maybe 6,000 cans of beer, serving a stadium of over 40,000 attendees who are going to bum rush this thing as soon as the Browns win a game. This is a perfect recipe for disaster, is it not?
No, because I don't think the Browns are going to win a game. But you know what? Okay, but outside of that, all they have to do is call the promotion and the campaign. Results and participation may vary.
Yeah, that'll take care of it all.
Also that 40,000 attendees, I think that number came from Facebook, so I'm not sure.
Bada bing.
Well played, sir. But can I just say on a serious note, this is uh, it's so sad when such a great idea, and this is really a great
It
idea.
is a great idea.
Yeah, except what happens is you end up with, the cost cutters and the bean counters and lack of budget that ends up, with an idea that doesn't reach its potential. Now, look, you can, if they've done, maybe they have done the math. Although, I mean, they certainly haven't when it's 6,000 cans and 40,000 attendees. But when you take out minors and you take out certain groups that, just people that are not drinkers, it's going to be lower than 40,000, but it's certainly not going to be 6,000. So it's just a pity when you finally get that, that kind of diamond in the rough that you would end up with being criticized, being on an ad fail instead of being lauded for being, for a piece of originality.
What we need is the marketing team over at Build-A-Bear to give the marketing team over at Budweiser a call. Try to figure this out between the two of them.
They got some experience.
Now, next up, the makers of a horror film, The Nun, apparently violated YouTube's terms of use by tricking viewers into thinking they needed to turn up their sound before scaring the bejesus out of them. Oh, man. Tim, sometimes cleverness doesn't beat out the need to not give folks a heart attack. I mean, this was a very clever idea that really didn't think through the whole process of what it might actually do to a consumer in that particular environment, especially an unsuspecting consumer.
Well, I got to be honest. We went to see Crazy Rich Asians last night, and there was a Nun trailer before it, and the very end of that trailer had everybody, all the girls that I was with, and all of them jumped and freaked out.
I jump at the end of that trailer. I've seen it on television. It scares the heck out of you.
It's a good one.
But
I don't think this is necessarily an ad fail. I think it's probably okay. I mean, I've also seen about 50 different YouTube videos that do that pull that off, that pull that trick on me. So
no, none of them take the time to trick you into making your volume as loud as it possibly can go.
No, I have seen that one. So I mean, they do that where they're like, in order to understand this, you have to turn it up, or they do that one where you have to put your face really close to the screen. Or there's versions of this. So I think they're just playing off of that, and I guess if they scared them too much, they weren't the right audience for this movie in the first place.
Not a good week for the church.
Oh,
Too soon?
Yeah, maybe a little too soon. That's why it's not in the ad fail. Last but not least, my favorite of the week, H&M had to pull a campaign for nursing bras after it was pointed out to them, Joe, that there was no way that any of the skinny young models that they use could have ever given birth to anything. I thought this was really kind of a silly mistake on the part of the brand. It's just like, how hard is it to cast real mothers for a nursing bra campaign?
I just thought you wrote the copy really well. I just chuckled when you said there was no way that any of the skinny young models could have given birth to anything. So, I don't know. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
I don't even know what to say about that. It's a rookie mistake.
It seems to be. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it, comment online, use the hashtag AdFail5. That's #AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
just like you know what I mean. It's like if it's, you know what I mean. I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean. Like it's like totally like that. It's like I don't know. Like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean. Yeah, it's just like kind of. It just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.